Imagine this. A person spends 8 decades chasing after the horizon of more. More possessions to feel secure, more achievements to prove their worth, more plans for a future that never seems to arrive. And yet, at the end of this long pursuit, the thirst has not ended. The wanting still whispers, the wheel still turns. This is not just a personal story, it is the condition of humanity itself. The Buddha named it plainly, tanha craving, the restless hunger that fuels suffering. It is the fire that drives us to accumulate, to compare, to compete, and still to feel incomplete. And it is endless. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, if I only have this, I will finally be at peace, only to discover that peace slips further away the moment you grasp what you desired? We live in a world overflowing with things, yet starving for meaning. We build houses filled with objects, yet hearts emptied of joy. We extend our lives with technology, yet shorten our days with worry. This is the uncomfortable truth. The modern pursuit of more is not a path to freedom, but a cage lined with comfort. But the Buddha offered another way. He taught that true richness is not measured by possessions, but by the absence of grasping. To live simply is not to be deprived, it is to be free. To want less is to taste abundance. At 80, one can discover that the secret to living is not to keep adding, but to begin subtracting the clutter, the grudges, the illusions of permanence. The question is not whether you own enough, but whether you can stop running. For in stopping, you will see what was here all along, the garden of the present moment, the warmth of love, the clarity of a mind at peace. This is where our journey begins. But to understand how craving enslaves us, we must first step into the heart of the cycle itself, the endless loop of wanting that traps the human spirit. The Buddha once compared craving to a man drinking salty water. The more he drinks, the thirstier he becomes. This is the tragedy of human desire. It promises satisfaction but delivers only deeper longing. Look at the cycle carefully. It begins with a spark. I want. That want could be small, a new piece of clothing, a recognition at work, a new device, a slightly larger house. The spark then becomes fire. To satisfy it, we work harder, stretch ourselves thinner, chase opportunities not because they liberate us, but because they might allow us to purchase the next object of craving. When we acquire it, the relief is temporary. Very soon, the mind whispers again, now what's next? The cycle repeats, wanting, working, consuming, and still wanting. This wheel is not different from samsara itself, the endless cycle of birth and death that the Buddha described. Just as beings are reborn through clinging, our desires are endlessly reborn through our own hands. Each craving gives rise to the next, a chain of becoming that never truly ends. Think about the storage rooms, the garages, the closets filled with things you thought were essential at some point in life. Where are they now? Forgotten, collecting dust, waiting for the moment you will admit to yourself, it's only stuff. This is why many who arrive at old age look back and realize that their lives were filled, not with living, but with endless maintenance of possessions. The house becomes a warehouse, the mind becomes a storeroom. And what does all of it amount to? Just weight on the body, weight on the soul. The Buddha's second noble truth is blunt but liberating. Tanha craving is the origin of suffering. It is not the world itself that binds us, but the hunger with which we grasp it. You can live in a palace and still feel imprisoned, or live in a hut and feel free. Freedom is not determined by what surrounds you, but by what you no longer cling to. The modern world has perfected the art of feeding desire. Advertising whispers, You are incomplete until you buy this. Social media shouts, you are less than others unless you acquire what they have. And so we spend hours, years, even lifetimes running after shadows, never questioning who taught us to want or why the wanting never ends. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you achieved something, bought something, or reached a goal and said, "Now I am complete"? The answer is almost never, because desire always moves the goalpost. Like a mirage in the desert, it promises water, but when you arrive, the horizon has shifted. You run again, you sweat again, and still the thirst deepens. This is why the Buddha called craving a fire. Fire consumes, it burns until there is nothing left. And the more fuel we give it, possessions, ambitions, comparisons, the hotter it grows. To live under its command is to live in restlessness. No moment is enough, no achievement is final, no relationship is secure. There is always another hill to climb, another possession to guard, another status to protect. But what happens when the fire is not fed? It begins to fade. The Buddha did not say we must starve ourselves or reject life. He taught moderation, awareness, and wisdom. To see desire clearly is already to weaken its hold. To ask, is this need real, or is it just the mind chasing shadows, is to reclaim your freedom. Living simply does not mean living without. It means refusing to be enslaved by the wheel of endless wanting. It is the art of stepping off the treadmill while the world continues to run in circles. It is choosing to stop, breathe, and realize that the ground beneath your feet is already enough. The cycle of craving is ancient, and it will whisper in your ear until your final breath. But the question is, will you keep obeying it, or will you see it for what it is, a trap, a mirage, a fire that consumes without end? Because once you recognize the cycle, a door opens. A new definition of wealth emerges, not in what you can acquire, but in what you can release. And this is where we must turn next. If true wealth is not in possessions, then where is it found? The answer lies in the richness of the soul, the treasure no thief can steal, no time can erode. When most people hear the word wealth, they think of numbers, bank balances, properties, gold locked away in vaults. Society has conditioned us to measure life by accumulation, to believe that security is a fortress built from possessions. Yet, when the Buddha was asked, "What is the greatest wealth?" his answer was not jewels, not land, not power. His answer was simple: Santuthi, contentment. Contentment is not glamorous. It cannot be displayed on a shelf or posted online for admiration. Yet it is the treasure that transforms poverty into abundance, and abundance into peace. A person with a garden, a loving partner, a loyal companion animal, and a heart that knows enough, is wealthier than a king tormented by endless ambition. Think of the elder who walks among the trees each morning. Their steps are slow, but their heart is light. They see the sunrise, hear the birds, feel the breeze, and know in that moment, I am rich. No stock market can grant this, no empire can secure it, because it arises not from possession, but from perception. Wealth is not what you hold in your hand, it is what you hold in your mind. Modern culture tells us the opposite. It whispers, you are what you own. It equates net worth with self-worth, teaching us to compare, to compete, to display. But the Buddha turned the teaching upside down. Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, trust the best relationship. These words remind us that the truest treasures are already here: our body, our breath, our capacity to love and be loved. Ask yourself, if you had everything you desired, but no peace of mind, would you call yourself rich? And if you owned very little, but lived without envy, without fear, without grasping, would you not be wealthier than emperors? This inversion is the key to freedom. For the wealth of the soul cannot be stolen, taxed, or diminished. It travels with you beyond possessions, beyond even death. Buddhist tradition is full of stories that illustrate this truth. Consider the monk who owned only a bowl and a robe, yet walked with unshakable dignity. Kings bowed before him, not because of his possessions, but because of his presence. His calm radiated like gold. His freedom was richer than any palace. Or think of the householder who, though not wealthy, lived with generosity. Each time he gave, he grew lighter. Each time he shared, his heart expanded. The act of giving became his treasure, and in that treasure he was never poor. True wealth also means independence from the tyranny of comparison. The modern mind is enslaved not just by what it owns, but by what it imagines others to own. We scroll through endless images of curated lives, mistaking appearances for reality, and then conclude that we are lacking. Yet, comparison is a thief that steals joy. Buddhist wisdom teaches, there is no one above or below you. There is only the path. When we walk our path with mindfulness, our steps are rich, regardless of what others carry. And here lies the great paradox. When you stop chasing wealth, you begin to live richly. When you stop clinging, your hands are finally free to receive. When you no longer need to prove, you can simply be. The wealth of the soul is discovered not in addition but in subtraction. Subtracting craving, subtracting fear, subtracting the illusion that your worth depends on possession. Imagine an old man at 80 years of age. He has no empire, no monument, no vault of treasures, but he has peace in his heart, love in his home, and clarity in his mind. He says, I am rich. And he is right, because richness is not measured in things, but in being. This is why the Buddha urged us to seek inner treasure, not outer trinkets. For outer wealth may vanish overnight, but inner wealth endures. It nourishes relationships, sustains the body, and shines through the eyes. It is a wealth that cannot be counted, but can always be felt. So the question arises, how do we cultivate such inner wealth? The answer begins with how we live each moment, whether we are present or distracted, youthful in spirit or old in fear. For the true treasure is discovered only in the now. What does it mean to grow old? Is it the wrinkles on the skin, the slowing of the steps, the count of years that stretch behind you? Or is it something subtler, the heaviness of regret, the weight of fear, the thought that time is running out? The Buddha once taught that the mind creates the world we live in, and in truth, the mind also creates our age. You can be 80 years old in body, yet still carry the lightness of youth in spirit. You can be 20 in years, yet already ancient, with worry, bitterness, and despair. Age, then, is less about the calendar and more about the state of the heart. Consider this. Many people, as they grow older, become haunted by the phrase, time left. They count days like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass, and in doing so, they drain the vitality of the present. They say, there isn't much time remaining. I must rush. I must cling. But this attitude is precisely what makes them old, not the years, but the fear. The Buddhist path invites a different way, the practice of smriti, mindfulness. To live mindfully is to release the obsession with time left and to root oneself in time now. The present moment, when lived fully, is timeless. It does not belong to age, it does not belong to youth. It belongs only to awareness. Think of someone at 80 who does not wake up counting the hours left, but instead says, "I am alive today. I breathe. I see the sky. I taste this tea. I speak with kindness." Such a person is not old. They are alive in the truest sense because they inhabit reality instead of chasing shadows of the past or projections of the future. Youthfulness of the spirit is not naivety, it is presence. It is the refusal to let life slip away in regret or anticipation. It is the courage to dance with the moment as it is. When the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, he did not conquer time. He transcended it by resting in pure awareness. And that same awareness is available to us whether we are 8 or 80. There is a story told of an elder monk walking through a village. A child asked him, "How old are you?" The monk smiled and said, "In this moment, I am not old, I am not young, I am only awake." This is the secret. When you are awake, age loses its power. So do not ask, "How many years are left?" Ask instead, "How deeply can I live this breath?" Each breath lived with mindfulness is eternity. Each smile offered in kindness is renewal. Each act of awareness is youth itself. To live young in spirit, you do not need to turn back the clock. You need only to step out of it. For youth is not a number. It is a presence, a freshness, a willingness to meet life as it is, here and now. And yet, while presence keeps us young, life inevitably confronts us with moments of loss. Loved ones pass, relationships end, and the truth of impermanence becomes undeniable. How do we carry the freshness of youth into the face of grief? To answer this, we must turn to the next teaching, the wisdom of impermanence and the lesson of loss. One of the most painful awakenings in human life is the loss of someone we love. No teaching, no philosophy, no ritual can fully shield the heart from that sharp absence. When a parent, a partner, a child, or a friend departs, it feels as if the ground itself has opened. Silence becomes heavy, and the question arises, what now? How can I live without them? The Buddha did not deny this pain. He did not pretend that spiritual practice erases grief. Instead, he taught us to see grief as a messenger of a deeper truth, anicca impermanence. Everything that arises must pass away. Every meeting carries within it the seed of parting. To be born is already to walk toward death, and yet we live as though this truth were not so, clinging as if our loved ones and even ourselves could remain unchanged. When we cling, loss crushes us. We sink into despair, asking why life could be so cruel. But when we open our eyes to impermanence, the nature of loss shifts. We see that it is not cruelty, but the law of existence itself. The river flows, and no drop can be held forever. The flower blooms, and its beauty is inseparable from the fact that it will wither. Our loved ones' laughter, their presence, their touch precious precisely because they could not last. The Buddha compared life to a bubble on a stream, radiant, glistening, and gone in an instant. To see this is not to become cold, but to become tender, for when we realize that every moment is slipping away, we hold it more gently, we speak with more care, we love with more urgency. Impermanence teaches us not to grasp, but to cherish. Consider the story of Kisa Gotami, a mother who lost her only child. Blinded by grief, she carried the lifeless body through the village, begging for medicine. The Buddha told her, "Bring me a mustard seed from any house untouched by death." She searched every home but found none. Finally, she understood. Loss touches all beings. Her grief softened into wisdom. Death was no longer her punishment alone, but a truth shared by the entire world. This wisdom does not erase sorrow, but it transforms it. It allows us to grieve without drowning, to remember without being destroyed. It whispers, yes, they are gone, but they were also here, and because they were here, your heart was enlarged forever. In this way, impermanence is both wound and healing. It is the wound that reminds us of fragility and the healing that teaches us release. When we see that we cannot cling, we begin to walk more freely. When we know that loss will come, we stop wasting time on resentment, on petty quarrels, on pride. Life is too short to be consumed by anger, too fleeting to be wasted on grudges, too fragile to postpone kindness. This is the teaching hidden in loss. Let go, forgive, love while you can, because when the final parting comes, only love remains unregretted. And so, the elder who has walked through grief can look back and say, yes, I suffered, but I also learned. I learned that nothing is mine to keep, and that is why everything is mine to love. Impermanence is the hardest truth, but also the most liberating. For when we stop clinging to permanence, we stop fearing change, and when fear dissolves, compassion blossoms. This leads us to the next teaching, the art of forgiveness and loving. Kindness, the way to live unburdened, even in a world of endless impermanence. When we reflect on our lives, we often remember not only love and joy, but also the wounds others have caused. Harsh words spoken in anger, betrayals that cut deep, friendships broken by misunderstanding. These memories cling to the heart like stones in a bag we carry on our backs. The longer we hold them, the heavier we become. The Buddha warned that hatred is like grasping a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at another. You are the one who gets burned first. Anger poisons the one who carries it, long before it harms the one at whom it is directed. And yet, how often do we nourish anger as if it were fuel, telling ourselves, I cannot forgive because they do not deserve it. But forgiveness in Buddhism is not about deserving, it is about release. To forgive is not to excuse harm or pretend it never happened. It is to free yourself from the endless cycle of resentment. For as long as you cling to hatred, the one who hurt you still controls your heart. When you let go, you reclaim your freedom. The practice of metta, loving kindness, teaches us to radiate goodwill, even toward those who have wronged us. This may seem impossible at first. How can we wish happiness to those who caused us pain? Yet the Buddha's teaching is radical. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is hatred healed. To meet hostility with hostility is to fuel the fire. To meet it with kindness is to quench it. Consider what happens when you hug someone instead of striking them, when you smile instead of scowl, when you say, I wish you well, even if they never say it back. Something shifts not only in them, but in you. A warmth rises in the heart, a lightness enters the soul. You become less bound to the chains of the past. Think of an elder who looks back at old conflicts and laughs gently. How silly it all seems now. Time has revealed what anger hides. In the vast scheme of life, most quarrels are meaningless. Why waste a short, fragile life on bitterness? The one who forgives lives longer in peace than the one who clings to hate. Forgiveness also connects us to impermanence. When we remember that life is fleeting, that we and our enemies are both passing shadows, anger loses its urgency. Do we really wish to spend our remaining days tightening fists when we could be opening arms? This is the art of living lightly. To walk without grudges is to walk without chains. To forgive is to place down the stones we've carried for decades. To practice loving kindness is to cultivate a wealth that no loss can diminish. The practice begins small, silently wishing, "May I be happy, may I be safe, may I live with ease." Then extending it outward, "May you be happy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." Even to those who wounded us. Slowly the heart softens, slowly the stones drop. When one reaches the end of life, what matters is not who won the arguments, but who loved most deeply. The elder who has learned to forgive radiates a gentle presence that comforts everyone they meet. Their wealth is not measured in possessions, but in the peace they carry and the peace they share. Forgiveness and loving kindness are not luxuries, they are necessities if we wish to be free. Without them, the heart remains chained. With them, we walk as light as air. And this brings us to the next step on our journey: contentment, the art of knowing enough. For only when the heart is unburdened can it rest in sufficiency. There is a teaching in Buddhism so simple, yet so revolutionary, that it can transform the entire direction of a life. It is the teaching of Trituk, knowing enough. The Buddha declared, "Contentment is the greatest wealth." And in these few words lies the key to freedom. Consider how much of human suffering comes from the thought, "I don't have enough." Not enough money, not enough recognition, not enough love. Even in moments when we have more than enough, the mind whispers, "It could be better, it could be more." And so, the hunger continues, restless and endless. But the one who knows enough carries a treasure that no thief can steal, no market can crash, no circumstance can diminish. To awaken in the morning and say, "This body, though imperfect, is enough. This breath, though fragile, is enough. This home, this meal, this moment enough," that is to live in true abundance. An elder at 80 who no longer desires to compete, to hoard, to prove, radiates a rare peace. They sit in their garden and say, "I need nothing more." Their wealth is not in accumulation, but in sufficiency. They are not driven by the claws of craving, but carried by the wings of gratitude. Think about this carefully. If you cannot be content with little, you will never be content with much. Because contentment does not come from the outside, it blooms from within. A millionaire can live in poverty of spirit, while a farmer with little land can live as a king. The difference lies not in what they hold, but in how they hold it. Contentment is also a shield. In a world that constantly screams, "You are not enough until you buy this, achieve this, become this," the one who practices Trituk becomes unshakable. They no longer chase every advertisement, every comparison, every illusion. They walk through the noise untouched because they have already declared within, "I am enough. My life is enough." This does not mean we stop growing or that we abandon effort. It means that our effort is no longer poisoned by restlessness. We work, but we are not enslaved. We live, but we do not grasp. We dream, but we are not consumed. Contentment does not kill ambition, it purifies it. In the end, contentment is not resignation, it is celebration. It is the ability to lift a simple cup of tea and feel as though you hold the universe. It is the wisdom to see that abundance is not something to be acquired, but something to be noticed. The elder who smiles at 80 and says, "I have enough," is wealthier than any emperor, for they walk in a kingdom that cannot be taken away, the kingdom of the present moment, filled with gratitude. And yet, there is one final lesson awaiting us. If we can live with contentment, how do we face the last frontier, death itself? How do we let go not only of possessions, but of life? To answer this, we must turn to the teaching of death, without fear returning to nature, and leaving behind only the fragrance of kindness. The great paradox of life is that we spend decades avoiding the one truth that has always been certain: death. We build monuments, craft legacies, and etch our names in stone, as if permanence could shield us from impermanence. Yet the Buddha taught that all compounded things are subject to dissolution. To cling to what cannot remain is to guarantee sorrow. To accept death as natural is to find peace. Imagine an elder at 80 reflecting on their final days. They do not ask for statues or graves that will soon be covered by weeds. They do not demand that the world remember them through monuments. Instead, they wish for their ashes to be scattered part in the sea, part in the forest. In this wish lies deep wisdom. To return to nature, to merge again with the great flow of life, is not loss but liberation. Buddhism calls this anatta, non-self. The body, the name, the reputation, none of these are truly ours. They are borrowed, temporary, passing. Just as a leaf falls back to the soil to nourish new life, so too we return to the elements. Fire consumes, water carries, earth embraces, air dissolves. In this cycle, nothing is truly lost. It is only transformed. Those who fear death often do so because they believe they will lose everything: their identity, their possessions, their relationships. But when one has practiced contentment, when one has learned forgiveness, when one has lived simply, there is little left to lose. The heart is already light, the hands already open. Death becomes not a thief, but a gentle guide. Think of a candle. When it burns out, do we mourn the flame, or do we recognize that the light has simply returned to the fire of the universe? The warmth it gave remains in memory, the glow it spread remains in others. This is the true legacy, not a monument of stone, but the fragrance of kindness left in every life touched. An elder who lived with simplicity and love needs no statue, for their memory is etched in the hearts of those they embraced. To be remembered as gentle, compassionate, considerate, and alive with spirit, this is the highest achievement, the Buddha taught. Our actions are our true belongings. They follow us like a shadow that never departs. What greater offering could there be than a life of kindness? To face death without fear is to understand that nothing is truly ours, and that is precisely why everything is precious. Each moment becomes sacred because it will not return. Each smile, each word, each act of compassion carries the weight of eternity within its briefness. So when the elder says, "I have lived well, I am ready to return," they are not resigning, they are awakening. Death is not an end, but a return. A return to nature, a return to truth, a return to the great silence from which all life arises. And from this silence, we arrive at our final teaching, the integration of all we have learned: simplicity, contentment, forgiveness, impermanence, and love all converge into one call, to awaken now while life still breathes through us. So, what have we uncovered in this journey? That wanting without end is a fire that consumes. That true wealth is not in possessions but in contentment. That youth belongs to the spirit, not the body. That loss is the teacher of impermanence. That forgiveness lightens the heart. That knowing enough is a treasure beyond gold. And that death, when embraced without fear, becomes a return to nature, not an enemy to resist. These are not abstract ideas. They are invitations. Invitations to live differently today, not tomorrow. For the Buddha's wisdom is not meant for monks alone, nor for scholars buried in books. It is for anyone who suffers because of wanting, anyone who fears because of clinging, anyone who longs for peace but searches in the wrong places. In other words, it is for all of us. Ask yourself now, What weight are you carrying that no longer serves you? What grudge, what craving, what fear is robbing you of the simple joy that could be yours this very moment? What could you release today to live lighter, freer, closer to peace? Remember, to live simply is not to lack, it is to be free. To let go is not to lose, it is to gain. To embrace impermanence is not to despair, it is to love more deeply. And to accept death is not to end it, is to return. The Buddha said, "Drop by drop, the jar is filled. So too, little by little, the wise fill themselves with good." Each moment you choose kindness over anger, sufficiency over greed, mindfulness over distraction, you place another drop in the jar of awakening. Over time, that jar becomes your greatest treasure. So let this be your call to awakening. Live simply, love fully, forgive easily, and walk gently, knowing that the greatest wealth is already within you.